I've been using the Fujifilm XT5 for the last couple of weeks, and in this video I want to share with you my initial thoughts and impressions on what could be the perfect travel camera. Also, this video is sponsored by Squarespace, but more on that later on. For those of you that are new here, I've been using Fujifilm cameras from 2018 for street photography, travel photography, and making these YouTube videos. I have nothing to do with Fujifilm, and all the gear that I own, including the XT5, I've purchased with my own money at the same time that you can get it when it comes out for general sale. I purchased the XT5 to replace my XT4 and be my dedicated photo first camera, whereas the XH2S, which is what's filming me now, I've had for a little while, and that is my video first camera. I will be sharing my thoughts and observations, however I will not be reading through the spec sheet. Also, this is not a full review. You can't do a full review on a camera after using it for just 2 weeks in mostly sunny or cloudy weather in the UK. I would be doing a full review 6 to 9 months from now, after I've actually used it in the real world and seen what it's like. And finally, if you stick around, I will show you a pretty neat little trick that you can do with the XT5 to save you a ton of time and stop you from missing a particular type of photo. Let's start with the good bits, and I'm happy to report there are many of them. The first thing that you would notice is that this camera is lighter and more compact. Although the differences are small, they are noticeable, especially when putting this camera in your sling or bag. The extra room is definitely apparent. Although this is smaller and lighter, the grip does seem to be a little bit better and a little bit deeper. Please keep in mind that I have hands similar to a 10-year-old girl, so for me this grip is ideal. However, if you have normal size hands, then you might find it to be a little bit on the small side. For reference, everyone loves the XH2 grip, whereas I can't even reach the joystick. The button and dial layout is identical to the previous camera, so you will get the top dials, which for photography I personally love. They allow you to see all your settings at a glance and make changes even with the camera switched off. Now, in the previous generation cameras, you had custom modes for the JPEG settings. However, in the XT5, what they've done is they've taken the mode dial on the XH2 with the 7 custom settings and implemented a software version of it. So effectively, you can have up to 7 different cameras set up and just change them between, C1 to C7 and have 7 very different shooting experiences. Now, this is something that I will talk about more later in the video. Now, I'll be honest and say that I actually like both types of screens. However, for a photography first camera, personally, I'm happy that they've gone back to the traditional 3-way articulating screen. Also, for filming, as long as you don't need to film yourself, the articulating screen is definitely a smoother experience for 4 reasons. First of all, it doesn't get in your way. Secondly, it's more compact, therefore much easier to blend in when shooting in busy locations. Thirdly, it is quicker to deploy either in landscape or in portrait orientation. And finally, it is far easier to use with thick gloves compared to what's on the XH2, for example. When you switch the camera on and just start playing around with it, you will notice a general speed improvement throughout the whole experience. Now, the other day I actually had an X100V that I used for a little bit, and I couldn't believe how slow, laggy and lethargic it felt in comparison to the XT5. From browsing menus, changing settings, switching modes and the autofocus, everything just feels faster. Speaking of the autofocus, this is a substantial improvement on the XT4. Now, sun's behind me, sunglasses on. This should be a very tricky eye detect autofocus scenario. How does that look? Is it keeping me in focus? And what's the ibis like? Is it moving around too much? Hopefully it's not. That's also the internal sound that you're listening to. And now same thing again, but I am walking into the sun, so my face should be lit up quite well. I've still got the glasses on. Hopefully it's quite sticky. Now obviously I can't see if it's sticky or not because the screen doesn't flip out, but overall, how does that look? Hopefully it's keeping me in focus. If I turn it around and then turn it around, it's very nice and light with the 18 f1.4. Definitely lighter than the XH2S with a bigger lens, but overall that should be okay. I mean, it looked promising on the screen earlier, so yeah. As you've just seen in the sample video, it's been tracking me pretty well. Now that was for video of course, but for photography it's equally as impressive. The images out of this camera are very good. The overall color rendering, tonality, cleanliness and the general feel of the photos, in my opinion, is an improvement on the XT4. However, this is just a general feeling so far and I would need more time to really understand the differences. This is also to say that the differences are not big enough to entirely dismiss the XT4 or the previous generation sensors. Of course, the big caveat to all of this is that if you like to print your photos extremely large or you like to crop a lot, then sure, the 40 megapixel sensor is definitely a bonus. Of course, it's not all rosy. There are certain aspects of the XT5 which I am not a huge fan of. When I first got the camera out of the box and I held it in my hands, I opened the doors, I turned the dials, my initial reaction was that it somehow felt a little bit cheaper than the XH2S, which would make sense because the XH2 and the XH2S are more premium flagship cameras. However, comparing to the XT4, it just feels like Fujifilm has used slightly cheaper materials, be it the paint, the buttons, and even the dials and how they sound when they click when you turn them. Now, is it a deal breaker? Of course it's not, but it's just something that I've noticed, therefore I had to mention it. The next negative is the fact that the EVF has not been updated that much, if at all. And the final negative is the price of the XT5 relative to the XH2. As it stands in the UK, the XT5 costs £1,700 and the XH2 costs £1,880. For only 180 quid more, you're getting a more capable camera with better build quality and with more features. Is it a deal breaker? Again, in my opinion, it's not. However, if you don't care about having a slightly bigger body, if you don't care for the dedicated dials at the top, and if anything you prefer the XH2 setup, and of course if you don't care for having a flippy selfie screen, then I would say for £180 more, you're probably better off getting the XH2 because you just get more for your money and you definitely get more value for the extra £180 that you've just spent. Now it's time for a quick pause to thank the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. Squarespace is my go-to all-in-one platform for managing my portfolio, blog, and online store. With Squarespace, I can better optimize my website so that it comes up in search and I get more eyeballs on my work. The best bit is that I can actively manage it from anywhere in the world using any device. Whether you're just starting out or already have an established business, Squarespace is a great choice. If this is something that interests you, click on the link below for a free trial and then 10% off your first purchase. Thank you to you for watching this bit of the video, and thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring. To summarize, the XT5 is a very good camera and a very good upgrade, but of course you would already know that I would say that because in my opinion the XT4 and the XT3 are both still very good cameras. In fact, many people are still using the XT2 and I'm more than happy with those. However, for me the XT5 pretty much fixes all the little issues that were wrong with the XT4, and as I've said, in my opinion, I think this is by far the most capable, the most compact travel camera that you can have that will do photography as well as good quality video too. The key question as well is it worth the 1700 quid asking price? Now, in my opinion, it is, but that's because I make a living from the camera, I use it every day. And even if this wasn't my income, photography is by far my biggest hobby, therefore I could justify it. Now, if I went out to buy an XT4 and paid the full retail price of, I think, £1,550, then for the extra difference, it is definitely a no-brainer. However, if you can pick up an XT4 that's used or that's on sale and pay maybe around £1,000 for it, then it's a more difficult sell in my opinion. And finally, before finishing up the video, let me share with you the little trick with the custom modes. So first of all, set up your camera as you would for general photography. For me, that's aperture priority, the multi-photometry setting and the zone autofocus mode. Then head into the menu and on page 3 in the IQ section, assign it to custom setting 2, denoted as C2. Next, leave the menu and change the multimetering mode to spot and the focus mode to single point. Go back into the same menu and assign this to custom setting 1 or C1. Exit the menu again and go into the button setup by pressing and holding the display back button. Change FN1 to recall custom 1 setting. Now when you press the FN1 button, the camera will switch into C1 and into spot metering and single point autofocus, all with the same switch. Press FN1 again and it switches back to the default setup. Now as you're walking around and you see some nice light, press FN1 and within a second you can get pretty creative and precise with your exposure and focus. Alright, that is all for today's video. Now I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's answered maybe 1 or 2 questions for you. Again, this wasn't a review, this is just my initial impressions of the camera. I will now get to work and start using it day in, day out for all of my photography, and then a full review will be coming later on next year. Until then, I want to say thank you ever so much for watching. Leave your thoughts, questions, comments, all that down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon. Bye.